Next this winter over the whole of the country. I think averaging 30% to 70% losses around the countryside, and a lot of it is down to bramble wasn't great last year, the ivy didn't really yield at all, and then we've had nothing really coming in since till about 2 or 3 weeks ago. And I put it down to really lack of pollen. Our bees were malnourished because they had no vitamins. And then I trickled in on top of methacillic acid on top of the malnourished bees, and I think that's where I lost a lot of my bees. I went into the winter with 86 colonies. I now have 60 left at the moment, but that was 26. But I also killed a few Uniting colonies. There would have been a few aggressors. I killed them off. Anything with yellow bands got killed off. So it might have been 26 losses in total, but there's a lot of nukes that. They're only just starting to come right now, and they won't be into a full hive for another month or so, they were bees that I wanted for the beginners. But that seems to be the same, anybody I'm talking to around the country, and then there is a few people that it didn't affect at all, sort of lucky ones. But anyway, most of this is John was looking for me to do 2 lectures in one, so I had to combine the 2 of them together and try and make up one. So it can be a little bit long-winded. I know you have a lecture at a meeting at the end of it, so we get through it as quickly as possible. So for me, right at this time of the year, is that I'm starting to think about not just my queen rearing, but I'm thinking about having fertile queens. And in order to have fertile queens, we need to have a huge volume of these out in the air. Not a matter of just 10 or 15 out there, but once that the queens go out, that they're going to meet a cloud of drones in the congregation area, no matter what time of the day that we're starting to get drones in the hives now. I don't start any queen rearing until the end of the 2nd week of May, which is just coming about right, because we're just starting to see the first of the drone combs in the hives, and we'll have drones on the wing. So there's no point in having queens out to be mated until we have our drones sexually mature. So we know that your drones is 22 days and then another 12 days to mature. So anything that you see there within the hive is going to be, another month before they're sexually mature. So what I do at this time of the year is that generally once I see the first dandelions starting to appear on the roadsides, in numbers, is I put in 2 frames into the hive. Well, I used to put 2 frames, but every frame now gets one of these, and generally it's a good frame from the year before, and probably what has happened is that they've just made a mess of the bottom of the frame. So what I just do is I just cut out about half or about 2/3, it's usually a little bit more than that, and I insert that in around the 3rd or the 4th frame. And then what happens is that once the dandelion and your flow and your nectar is coming in, especially the horse chestnut now, is that they will draw this down, this blank space, literally within about 3 or 4 days, and have it completely filled up with drone comb. It's also very good as well, because what it does is it stops them drawing comb in the other frames. So you're not making a mess out of your other frames, and your other frame should be then 90% drone comb that's in there. And you don't have to pull frames out then the following year. They were perfectly put them in and they made them into drones. And it does make a visible difference in your hives, especially if you're putting that into your hives that are your breeder queens. And you can see now this is a back frame, and back frame is generally where all the drones hang out anyway. But you can see the visible difference that it makes of your drones in your hives. And if you're not going to do it to all the hives in your apiary, the very least that you should be doing is in your top hives, your best hives. Be putting out your best drones that are out there to try and swamp the other drones that are in the area. And you can see just here, this was at the end of the season anyway, especially when you're producing that amount of drones in the hive, you're going to be seeing your deformed winged virus, which is a side effect of the varroa mite within the hives. So, is there any beginners here, sir? I want to apologise to you if some of it will be a little bit overboard, but I have to make an hour out of a 3-minute lecture. And this is all little stuff that's going on behind it, so just you will understand a little bit, but it's the technical end at the back of the beekeeping, you know, that happens without us even knowing. You know, so the next important thing to start, before you do any queen rearing at all whatsoever, we have got to have copious amounts of pollen coming into the hive. There's no point in, even if you're in 2 weeks' time, you say, I'm going to start queen rearing, and there's no flow, there's bad weather, and there's no pollen coming into the hive, is that don't start your queen rearing. This is your multivitamins, this is your protein, it's the building cells for healthy bees, and without pollen coming into the hive, you cannot rear brood. Brood can't be reared on your carbohydrates alone, which is the honey. We have to have pollen come in. And this side effect of pollen is, what do we need the pollen for? The pollen, it's really the composition of royal jelly. And the royal jelly is what makes our queens. And your queen needs to be fed copious amounts of royal jelly in order for it to turn into a mega-sized larva and to give you a quality tip-top queen. So we need to have drones. We need to have loads of pollen coming into the hive, and just to show you just that this will come in later on as well, is that there's a huge difference between the royal jelly that's fed to workers, and there's a difference of royal jellies that's fed to queens, and there's also a difference in the makeup of the royal jelly that's fed to drones as well. And this is where it comes into, especially for those that are going to be queen reared and grafted, that it makes a huge difference, is that we need to get our queens or potential new queens onto queen royal jelly as quickly as possible, because if not, we're just going to end up with an inferior or a slightly less productive queen. So, and this is the difference of it, is that if you don't have copious amounts of pollen coming into the hive, is that these here on the left-hand side is the workers of a laying, or the ovaries of a laying worker, and this is the ovaries of a fully functioning queen. And anywhere in between that is a malnourished queen, a queen that hasn't been fed right, a queen that has been started a little bit late in emergency cells, or we've had a lack of pollen then coming into the hive as well. So this is what we're trying to do with our queen rearing and with our queen cells as well at the same time, is to produce a queen that at the end of the year is going to be able to fill colonies. And there's, just to show you the difference, that I tried a little bit of queen rearing when there wasn't a flow coming on, and I forced the bees and I gave them no choice to draw down queen cells. And this is what we call a really tip-top quality queen. And the rest of these are all queen cells that I forced them to draw down by making them queenless, but they were trying to make queen cells just in bad conditions, and they didn't have the pollen coming into the hives in order to feed the cells. So that just shows you another range of what once you're doing a bit of queen rearing, you get this range, and I would, well, these are non-functional anyway, you know, but these are the only ones here. Probably the fourth one is here that I would select, and these other two that I would just break down. What's the difference is, I just hedge my bets and just go that those ones weren't fed as good as the other ones. So, and the difference of it is that if you pick a cell like this in order to head up your colony, and it's the same whether it's a supersedure cell or whether it's an emergency cell or a natural queen cell within the hive, and you're breaking everything down and you leave it, is you want to be leaving the biggest cell that's at all possible there, because there's a possibility you end up with something like that. Can you see your queen? That's making it a little bit easier, and that's what I would call a scrub queen. It's a queen that has been developed probably under emergency conditions, where they can rear a queen or a larva, a 4-day-old larva. They can take it and produce it into a queen, which means that it's only been fed queen royal jelly for 2 days, and it's been fed worker royal jelly for 4 days. So anything like that is not capable of doing this, but it is probably capable of filling about half a super, but they never go up into the second super. So if you have a hive that's not functioning beside one that's well, That's a little bit of imagination, that one there, is because
Wrong way.
Exactly.
a little bit of exaggeration and imagination, but it would have been on 5 supers, and what happened is that I did swarm control on a hive, and I just put another 3 supers just on the top of it to, I took the supers off and for them just to finish off and clean it up. But there would have been 5 supers of our own there on that, you know. So why is this one here producing, able to produce 5 supers of honey, and this one here has half a super, is that I always blame the queen, is the first thing that I wanted. And so, just taking it back a little bit here, just for the beginners again, is that to understand the concept of what happens within the queen cell is that we know that it's 3 days there's an egg, and on the 3rd day then your egg hatches. It just lies down on the side and it hatches out into larva. And as soon as it hatches out into a larva now, straight away it's fed copious amount of royal jelly and queen royal jelly. That is different than the worker royal jelly. The difference of it is a worker is always fed in that direction. As soon as the cell is turned upside down, into that direction, then upside down, is that the bees have no choice at all whatsoever, but they have to feed that egg as it hatches out and turn it into a queen cell. So on about the day after the queen cell is sealed, that this little larva here uncurls, and it uncurls out here into its C-shaped, into hanging completely upside down, and this will be the mouth part down here. And then it goes into pupation. And the day, that's day 8 when it's sealed, and then 8 days later, when it's turned into this sort of what we call the classic peanut shape with the indentations on it, is that 8 days after that, then the queen hatches. So we can just see the difference of it is that how you age, if you're breaking down queen cells, and you want to try and find out what age that the queen is, or when the rest of them are likely going to hatch out. And we know that if we see it starting to develop into a purpleized stage, is that it's about day 12, so it's sealed about 4 days at that stage, and it has about another 4 days for it to hatch out. And then once we see the queen cell starting to darken up anything at all whatsoever, is that, and turning to brown, is that it, generally you're within about a day and a half to 2 days of it hatching out. And the last thing that you can just see here to develop within the queen cell is that you can just see the wings there just starting to develop. So it's really important that once you're doing your swarm control in the hive, that you don't shake the frame that your queen cell is on, because not only can you damage the mouth parts, but you can end up damaging the wings as well at the same time if they start rattling around within the comb. So be very careful with the queen cell that's going to head up your colony, that you don't shake the frame at all whatsoever. So why do they produce swarm cells? Is that now, if they're producing swarm cells, it's generally down to you, which is you're causing, it's overcrowding, you're not getting your supers on. Even if they only have 2 or 3, 4 frames of brood at this stage, you need to get your supers on, because there's nectar coming in and they need to put it somewhere. They also need to, they're needing to break down the rest of the winter stores that's there in order to expand the brood nest. And if you don't give them room, and if you haven't got the super above your head, then they're overcrowded and they don't have enough room, and you will induce them into swarming early. We have natural reproduction swarming, which is you give them enough space, it's strong enough to swarm, and the idea of natural swarming is that they should be able to swarm early enough in the year that they're able to produce up to a full colony again in order for them to go through the winter time to survive and come out in the spring. Emergency, which is caused by the beekeepers get well a lot of the time, which is when we accidentally kill a queen or we remove a queen out of the hive. And once you remove a queen out of the hive, there's no pheromones of the queen in the hive, and your workers then go into emergency mode into producing a queen cell. And this is where you have to be careful when you're picking your queen cells afterwards, that you don't pick an emergency cell, because under natural conditions they will rear a queen from a larva just literally as the egg hatches. Where is that if you remove the queen, they panic and they rear the queen from a larva that could be 3.5, 4 days old. And that's the difference of it is that if you're using it, it's been fed worker royal jelly instead of queen royal jelly for 4 days. And that's where you have the potential in emergency mode of ending up with screw queens or inferior queens. Supersedure is really happens in I'd say from middle of July onwards, is that of any swarm cells I would class them as supersedure. I was going through a friend's hive there about 2 weeks ago and there was one cell in it, but and you could see the queen was failing and they were just replacing her earlier in the year. She's hatched out, so it's another 2 weeks before she's due to it. So, but from now on, generally, if you're seeing any queen cells, they're swarm cells. So, for raising queens is that, I suppose, what most people use is to use natural queen cells that are coming along the hive, and they do their splits. The next easiest one to use after that would be the cup kit. And I started off on that. I used it for a year, but it's a little bit slower. And then after that, then is grafting, and I'll just explain a little bit on what grafting is as well. Right? There is a fabulous queen reared calendar out there. If you just put into Google queen reared calendar, there's a site in America, and all you have to do is once you think you're going to do your queen reared, if you're going to try a little bit of grafting this year, or you're going to use the cup kit, in order to increase your colonies, if you just put in the date that you graft, if you put it in the 11th of June 2012, and then you just hit the button create a calendar, and it actually does a calculation of you of when the cell will be sealed, when it's going to hatch, and when it should be due to lay as well. So there's no point in, I use it instead of using my fingers and toes to calculate it out, that I use it, and it's grand because there's no point in you having 5 or 6 or 10 queens hatching out, and there's a wedding or a confirmation on that day, and you're down there in your, not in your bee suit, but your suit trying to extract queens before they hatch, so you can get into trouble that way. So the cup kit system here is that it's easy enough to use. The queen is put in here when she's in full lay about this time of the year onwards. And what happens is at the back of it we have all these little cups, and the queen is at this stage, she's firing off eggs like a machine gun, and she lays in all of these little cups. You remove the queen out of it, and 3 days later you come back and you remove the eggs just as they have hatched, and you put them onto your cell bar. The only difference of this is that it takes about 5 different visits to the hive. You got to put the kit in, you got to find your, let them polish it up, then you got to find your queen and put her in. You've got to come back 24 hours later, release her, and then when the eggs hatch, you've got to go and take the eggs out and put them onto a cell bar. So there's a minimum of 4 to 5 visits, which is time consuming. But when you get on to grafting, then literally you can do a full cell bar within 5 to 10 minutes. It's important for your queen rearing that if you're going to do grafting, that you've got to graft into a colony that is super strong, because it's your depth, it's the density of the bees. So generally what I would do is that I'm going to graft into a colony that is already probably in swarm mode, that have already peaked into prime condition. I would have colonies there at the moment that's into its second super, they're about 3 weeks onto their 10th frame of commercial brood. So that one there is the first one that I have that I would have earmarked for being my breeder colony, or the one that I'm actually going to put my cell bar in, because what I'm looking for is the density of bees. Yes, I can make a nuke queenless, but unless that nuke is absolutely bursting with bees, then I'm not going to get the quality cells that I need. So, we just go on with it. So what you have there, right, by doing this, then what we've done is we have the natural conditions for within the cell bar. We have crowded conditions of the brood nest, we've an overabundance of nurse bees, and we have a huge amount of comb builders as well, right? And by removing the queen out of it, we have the lack of queen pheromones, and we now have the emergency mode as well, and we have the natural conditions, and we also have the crowded conditions as well at the same time. So we now have used the three conditions that the bees need in order to produce quality queen cells. By having densely packed hives, we've removed the queen out, and she's on about 3 or 4 weeks where they have produced 10 frames of commercial brood. So a huge amount of young bees that's in there as well. So I often do for the first my first graft, if I have my first colony that is bringing down queen cells, I leave the queen in it, and I graft directly into the colony with the queen in there. I just knock down all the queen cells that's there, and my thinking on that is that they're already in swarm mode. You're not going to get any better drawing down queen cells than a colony that's actually wanting to draw down natural queen cells. So I knock down all the natural queen cells, I go to my cell bar, and I graft onto the cell bar, and I arrange the brood nest, that in the centre of the brood nest I leave a little gap, and then I place the graft straight into the centre of the brood nest. I'm after missing a slide somewhere. This is, yeah, they're a little bit back to front. So, the logic of grafting is that we have this, we have a little, what we call a Chinese grafting tool, and it's very, very fine. It's nearly paper thin plastic, and this goes down underneath the larva that's there, that's just about hatched out, and we take it out and we place it into this cell bar here, this cup. And the idea of it is that once that we take the newly worker larva and we put it in a cell cup and we present it to the bees by turning it upside down, is that not only do the bees have no choice into pulling it out into a queen cell, is that they think that it is a queen cell that they've selected themselves, and you're not going to get any better larva than that. And this is about the age of what we're selecting, and that one there would be about, I would say, about 6 hours old. The same with this one here. You can just see that one is just about 6 hours after hatching, which is ideal, that you can get it onto the queen royal jelly straight away. And this is what your Chinese grafting tool looks like. So when I said, to slide it a little bit back to the forward, you can blame John on that because I was trying to get it, is that, so this is your cell bar, right? And these are all the little plastic cups that we're going to take your 6 hour old larva into, and we insert these into the plastic cups. And once the cups are turned upside down into the centre of the brood nest, where we have removed the queen, all of a sudden now we're presenting them with 20 queen cells to draw down. And I can guarantee you that under the right conditions, you should get 16 to 18 queen cells drawn, and then you can select your best ones then out of that. But I would always have about 5 or 6 cell bars there. I would always say to you, have a minimum of 2 cell bars made up. This one here is you just have a screw in it, so it's actually able to pivot them out to the side so that you're able to work properly by putting the larva into the cells. It's more exposed to you. But always have a couple of them, because if you have a colony that's ready to swarm, you can go to your breeder queen and graft straight into that. So, and that's the basics of it there. Is your little tongue just goes down underneath the larva that's just hatched out. It's lifted, and you try and lift it with the royal jelly, and then it's inserted then onto these bars here and put into the hive. So, as I said, is what I would have done before I have gone to graft is that I would have arranged the brood nest is I would have went through the hive and I would have taken all the open brood, and this is what we call open brood. Open brood is anything that's not sealed. It's after hatching on the 3rd day and before it's sealed on the 8th day. This is probably the strongest, if not the second strongest pheromone that you have within the hive, is the open brood pheromone. And once you bring this into the very centre of the brood nest, what follows into the centre of the brood nest for all your nurse bees? All your nurse bees. So put all your sealed brood out to the outside, it doesn't need as much heat. Bring all your open brood into the centre and you leave that gap for your frame of larvae that you're going to put down straight into the middle. And usually what happens is when you come back within about 10 minutes of arranging the brood nest, the very centre of that is like a swarm. You can't see the bottom of the brood box with the amount of bees that are clinging there, keeping the heat on the young brood. And that's essential that you have that arranged before you present the young larvae. So what happens is that you can look at your cell bar about a day later, and that's what you see. And that you can say that that's 100%. It's going to be a queen cell. That's going to be a queen cell. And this one here is probably a little bit shorter. So probably maybe the larva got turned over, or it just dried out a little bit. And that's one then that would probably I would scrub later on and not use that one. So and then 4.5 to 5 days later, they're sealed because we know it's sealed on day 8. So if we take the 3.5 days out of it from the egg hatching, because we're using a 6-day-old larva, so that's about 4.5, and then we have them sealed. So what do you do now when you have them sealed? If you have them in a colony where it's queen right and the queen is still running, which is probably the first colony that I would use in the year, is you need to get them out, because we know that the queens swarm, or the attempt to swarm, the day after the queen cells are sealed, and this is why it's essential that you keep a precise date of when the queen cells are going to be sealed. And that's why it's very precise that you're using a larva that's only about 6 hours old. But it's grand. Once your expertise comes up with it, you can do it. But my advice to you would be remove the queen out of it, and then you don't have to worry about the queen swarm. So, if you have grafted into a hive, is that you always need to check for emergency queen cells around the place, because you have removed the queen, you've grafted into it, and not all times, most times they will only draw queen cells down on the cells that you have given them. But you will on some of the back frames just get a little emergency queen cell. And you need to check all your frames, shake all the bees off it, and check, because the likes of these little small ones here, you'll miss, there's small ones there, and this one here is, you need to shake off all the bees off the frames. Check and break down any queen cell that's there, because these will be all scrubbed emergency queen cells. Ones that would have been sealed before day 6, or they would have used a 3 or 4 day old larva. So, because what can happen is you can put a queen cell into the hive, and one of these little scrub ones will hatch out a day or 2 earlier than your good queen cell, and you'll end up with your queen cell being killed. So that's just what happens when you just see workers tear down queen cells when they decide that they don't want to use that or to swarm anymore. So, an incubator, for anybody that wants to do queen rearing at all whatsoever, is that even if you're cutting queen cells out of a hive, is what are you going to do? There's no point in putting them into an Aquadea box when there's a good possibility the queen cells can fail. So I will put mature queen cells out and put them in the incubator and let them hatch in the incubator. Once they hatch in the incubator, you know 100% that you have a queen. And literally it just pays for itself. You know, they cost about 120, that's a Brinsea octagon. And even if you're only to produce 3 or 4 queens in the year, it certainly pays for itself. I can put about 40 queen cells into that one there. So. And a little, I just put a little bit of chicken wire in it just to keep them from from falling over. The temperature you run it at is 30